Hello and welcome to the Spiraling Higher podcast, hosted by me, Sam, mindset and manifestation coach.
And me, Gina, your biz and mindset coach. We're here to support you on your spiritual journey by bringing you intimate and raw conversations about healing, manifestation, consciousness, and spirituality.
We hope this podcast makes you feel less alone as you become aware of your patterns and limiting beliefs to up-level your life, manifest like a boss, and together, spiral higher.
Happy New Year, spiralers, or maybe I should say happy new moment.
Happy new moment.
Happy new moment. If you listen to one of our last episodes at the end of 2024, we talked about the illusion of the new year and the permission to start and begin again. But here we are in 2025. I'm one of your co-hosts, Sam, and I'm, of course, here with Gina, my bestie and co-host. And we wanted to start off the year with an honest reflection of where we're at and what the hell 2024 was. Because through coaching as many of our clients as we have together and separately, I think what we have come to realize is that we're all chasing the illusion of a perfect life. Maybe you're listening to this podcast, maybe you're reading a book right now, or you're in a coaching program, and your carrot that you're chasing is that it's all going to get better. I'm never going to struggle. It's always going to be good. As soon as I learn how to make more money, as soon as I learn how to manage my emotions. And I'm not trying to knock, and neither is Gina, that we shouldn't learn how to manage our money, that we shouldn't learn how to soothe and regulate our emotions. But Gina, don't you feel like this last year was us just realizing, even if we gain all of these tools, sometimes life will still be hard?
I mean, I feel like this year, especially for the tail end, was a lot of going back to basics and remembering, relearning, revisiting a lot of these quote unquote basic teachings like that life is cyclical. I think that really came up for me a lot of how cyclical and seasonal everything is, that nothing is permanent. And I wouldn't say that I'm somebody that resonates as much with believing that we're going to get somewhere where we're never going to feel bad again. However, there are still these micro carrots, as you said, baby carrots.
Yeah.
Baby carrots of things that we believe are going to be better over there. Better once I get this, or that we'll be free from something. And it's not to say that we're not going to feel better, but I think the insidious, maybe poisonous part is the attachment to it and the almost desperation of it. And I think that's when we can kind of quickly fall into being really attached and not even notice it, not even know that we're living in an illusion, not even knowing that we're chasing something, because it can feel like we're doing the thing that is soul aligned, but it can turn into something that feels a lot more like chasing.
Yeah, well, it's not really aligned if it does feel like chasing.
Exactly.
Right? We're not coming from a place of security, groundedness, trust, our values. It all feels very fear-based. And I think like Gina said, we're not trying to say you can't apply these tools and listen to these conversations or, invest in resources that are going to help you feel better. But I think that has to come from a place of, I'm still okay with who I am and where I am now, though.
Yes.
Like, yes, I want to experience maybe an expansion of my skill set in this area. I want to be able to put more time and attention over here. And I love who I am right now. And I think that, you and I both, we've still been integrating that for the past 6 years. Where we kind of move in and out of these seasons of like, okay, like I'm deeply accepting myself. I feel good. Yes. And then we start to, move into motion towards a thing. And then, we just find ourselves getting really stuck on that thing again, fixating on that thing. And that's why if any of you listeners listened to our episode on to scale or not to scale, I think that was episode 88. It was a really beautiful confrontation that we had with both of our patterns and, the unconscious pattern of like, oh, we have to keep growing. We got to keep, expanding this thing. We got to keep investing in this thing. And again, nothing wrong with that. We think scaling can be a beautiful service to a large number of people. It can be a way you expand your skill set and live your mission. But it can also be a way that you constantly reject what is right now. Like, I felt as if it was starting off to be really beautiful, really organic. And then it felt like we're too small. We need to grow bigger. We need to grow faster. And it's been such an interesting place to kind of hang out for the past couple months where I'm not seeking this growth, this constant poisonous, cancerous growth. I'm just taking care of myself and hoping that's going to blossom into growth.
I mean, I think even inherently you having that perspective is growth. I think that's what's so funny too. I mean, with kids, it's so funny to me when, you see somebody you haven't seen in a long time. Like when you see Emmeline after a long time, it's like, oh my God, you're so much bigger. And it's like she's growing actually every day, like even if we can't see it.
True.
And so I think with growth, that's also what's hard is I think when we're in this self-awareness, self-healing journey, because we have experienced so many leaps and epiphanies, I think that we can also start using that as a measuring stick of what growth feels like. That growth is going to always feel like this big, expansive, like huge download. But growth is also us just noticing, hey, I was chasing something again. Like that is growth.
Totally. Actually, you're making me realize something really huge right now, which is that because we can't see and experience our growth in a real way, we try to create things that indicate to ourselves that we have grown. So for example, if I scale spiraling higher, then maybe it will be easier for my mind to be like, oh, look at me. I grew, right? Look at all of this growth that I'm able to externally identify. But if we don't create that, then we feel a little bit like, have I grown? And so we do have to redefine growth. Like you said, noticing when you're in a pattern is growth. And actually, if I look back on 2024, she's all in the past now, all the lessons I take with love, but it wasn't a year that I could really look at my external reality and identify, hey, that was growth. But when I really look inward, I'm like, no, I responded so differently to situations that would normally have thrown me into a spiral. I really valued my relationships and even my simple hobbies more. I took care of my body more. I rested more. And these are things that I used to think were going to hinder my growth, which is so funny. Like, oh, if I take rest, if I like hang out with my friends too much, like I'm not going to grow. But that was only one facet of my life that I was constantly trying to grow. But I was basically categorizing that as the only type of growth that existed.
Yeah.
And by focusing in other areas of my life, I was actually able to experience like human growth, not just business growth.
Yeah, I think that is something that I absolutely did fall into a lot of, especially growing up and with the core wounds that I've had, is because we can't measure what's inside, there is a lot of safety in measuring in something metric driven, right? That's why social media is so dangerous sometimes for people who don't know how to measure their intrinsic value or their intrinsic growth. And I think motherhood is one of those really beautiful examples. Like, I actually cannot measure if I'm a good mom. Like, there is no monitor for me to check like how many people liked my parenting today, or how much did my daughter comment on my breakfast this morning. None of that exists. It's all how I feel. How does the relationship with her feel? And I think that's been a really beautiful template for me to use as an internal measuring thing, like that it just can't be measured. And I think that can be really confusing for people who are quote unquote trying to grow. But as you said, I think it's important for us to find our own measuring devices internally. And that's not going to look like a regular measuring thing external. There's no numbers on it. It really has to be based on a feeling, like a felt sense. And I think that is how, even what you just shared, that's how you know you've grown, because you're like, it feels different. inside of here, I can feel that, oh, I'm responding to myself in a different way. That feels better to my system. That can, to me, I think that is the only important kind of growth we ever really should be looking for.
Yeah, I was going to also say, or just throw out the idea of measuring altogether. Like,
100%.
what are we measuring? What are we counting? You know, I say this with love, but when I see people who are still doing habit trackers, I'm like, girl, like, I'm like, I know you, I was you, but what are you trying to control through that? And what is it that you get to think about yourself if you look at your past month or your bullet journal and you see 30 check marks for how often you worked out or drank a green juice? It's like, that's not the way to your worthiness. And honestly, needing to track your habits is why you don't feel worthy. Because
I think it can be both. And I think that's the whole thing that you and I always say. It's all of this is medicine in the right dosage, right?
True.
So any kind of medicine, whether it be habit tracker, journaling, all of that can be very harmful or not. It can be helpful. And I think it requires a lot of discernment to know that. I think for someone to have a habit tracker, that could literally be the thing that brings them right back into attachment. And for somebody else, it could be the thing that they need to maybe build self-trust or maybe to help them remember things. I don't know. I'm just saying. But I think the perspective that you're offering, though, does represent a lot of people who are using it as a way to check off, like give themselves permission to feel good about themselves.
Totally.
And the work that we're trying to amplify here is for you to love yourself, see your own growth, see your value with or without that check mark.
Yeah, I think exactly what you said. It can be both in the right doses, but I think we have a really hard time not giving meaning to the number of check marks there are or aren't.
Of course.
I think tracking is a really great thing to do for essentially not yourself. Like, like if I wanted to track how often I watered my plants or something like that and like just observe the growth of the plant, I'm not going to make that mean something about me. Although I could make it mean that I have a bad green thumb or something like that. But I mean, you could distort anything. But I think that when we're constantly analyzing ourselves, I find that we don't get good results. And you know, I was on TikTok pre everyone freaking out about the ban, which was overturned, which is hilarious. But there was this stitched video I saw, which was really good. And it was a girl asking, what do you ladies do in order to like feel more confident? Like, please give me tips. I want to feel better about myself. And then it stitched to this other video. And she was like, I think the problem is that you're thinking too much about yourself. Like, and that led me to another video, which had a quote that I'd heard before. And it said, confidence is not necessarily thinking less of yourself. It's just thinking of yourself less. And I sat with that for a while and I was like, I think that's true. Because if you think you're accessing confidence by thinking more of yourself, you're really just activating a sense of pride, maybe superiority, but that's not true confidence. That's coming from a place of insecurity.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we could go into a rabbit hole of that because I think confidence means something so different to so many people. So I think it also just depends.
But that's the thing, is it's like I'm realizing that a lot of people don't have the same definition of what confidence is.
I mean, people have a different definition of like literally every word that exists.
True.
Especially ones that are emotionally charged like confidence. And especially when it's a word that we believe if we have, we'd be better. Right. So I think that's why it can mean something so different to so many people. But yeah, that's an interesting take.
Yeah. She's like, it's just thinking of yourself less. As in like focusing on other things and not constantly hyper fixating on like, if I'm good enough and if I deserve to be confident.
Yeah, I feel like I would take a different angle, which is interesting because I think mine does include thinking of yourself, but not your lack. I think that's the difference. I think a lot of times when people are chasing confidence, they're thinking about themselves a lot, but in a very egoic way. With a lack lens and egoic judgment layer of perspective. Whereas I think the work that we often lead our clients into is, yes, think of yourself more, but from the lens of how can I support myself? How can I really see myself? I think the people that are chasing confidence and they're thinking about themselves a lot, they're not actually seeing themselves. They're seeing what they're missing and what they need to have. And the work that I'm doing within my own being and what I encourage my clients to do is can you just notice and see yourself as you are? And can you fall in love with that part? Can you fall in love with that entire being? Because something that you said earlier too, it's like, it's about being okay here. And sure, adding this to my life could be a fun experience, but can we be okay being here and not waiting for something else to happen until we can feel better, which I feel like is like manifestation 101. But I think that's really hard. Like if you think about weight loss as an example, like let's just say somebody is trying to build more muscle for their health, and that is a positive intention. It's about being able to go to the gym and maybe eat, better choices, whatever you want to say, and not wait for that scale to change or for the size to change for you to feel better, right? It's like, how can it's the reason why we're doing it has to be different. It can't be, oh, I want to get skinnier so that I can feel better, but that this, like I see myself, I know that this would be supportive for me. This helps me to feel stronger. I think the intention it's everything. Like the reason why we're driving.
Yeah. I mean, it completely changes whether you feel good on the way or not, which really just translates into whether you like your life or not, because your life is always on the way to something.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting because it kind of brought something up for me that I felt like was going back to basics, but this feels like a little bit of a deeper awareness. But I had this thought of how whatever we believe that we want or want to have in our life, to really think about, okay, imagine if you got it, right? So I feel like money is the best way to think of this. So I want everyone to really think about, like, what is that dollar amount that if you just got that, you'd be like, oh yeah, like that would just make everything so much better. $50,000, $1 million, 10 million, just think about that and really think about like what would be the somatic response if you actually got it. Like if someone were to say, hey, Sam, you got $5 million right now, whatever that somatic response is to that, that's what you need more of. And so for a lot of us, we might feel like relief. So I've talked to my clients about this, and a lot of them are like, the response in their body is like, oh,
yeah.
Kind of like that, like, oh my God, yes, like, thank God, that relief. And so I've been encouraging my clients to find more of that. How can you invite in more of that feeling of, yes, maybe that is one of my clients. She, quote unquote, let herself have a day off and go draw. And she just went by this body of water and just drew all day. For somebody else, that might be grabbing a really, I don't know, good cup of coffee or seeing their friend, but whatever gives you that, I think is what we need to kind of, I guess, medicate ourselves with. Maybe that's not the right word, but to offer ourselves. Yeah, to soothe ourselves. And then, yes, of course, you can keep going on to wanting to grow your business and all of that. But I feel like all of us are trying to, not all of us, many of us are chasing something in hopes to get a drip of that soothing and that medicine. But I think we're often missing why we're going after that in the first place, which, yeah, I try to think about, like I said, that somatic response to getting that thing, and that usually will indicate really what you're seeking and what your system needs.
Yeah. And it also really highlights the attachment if you don't think it's possible to experience that without the thing, right? If you say, why don't we try to create that experience in your body now? How can we create some lightness, some ease? And let's say the mental response is like, no, I can't because I need to do XYZ and I have to make this money and I have to blah, blah, blah. It's like, but there it is right there.
Yeah.
Like you've made it contingent, which is why it feels so bad right now. And yeah, I mean, I had my own sort of mental spiral, honestly, over the last month or so, because, okay, when we started season 3 at the beginning of last year, we started off with a really strong episode about kind of going slower to go fast. Really, really post like healing from the hustle and all of that. And I think I unconsciously thought that because I went so slow for a while, I was like, I'm ready to go into high gear. Like, I'm ready for some energy. Like, I kind of thought, like, okay, like, slow, yes, good. But we go slow so we can go fast. And a really big integration I've had to make. And it kind of sucked at first, I'll be honest, because I didn't want it. But I'm realizing what I am resisting is actually what I do want and need. I should say it's what I need, which is what I want.
Yeah.
But because of the speed and the adrenaline and the hustling and the anxiety that we were performing at before, I was kind of operating at these two poles, right? Where I would go into this like high overactivation, and then I would naturally trigger the opposite of that cycle, which would be the underactivation, the down regulation. And I didn't realize that after I would heal all of that, that the best place to be, a healed place to be for me would actually be in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And I was unconsciously trying to get back to how fast I was going and how much I was doing, as if like, okay, yeah, like I'm resting and it's cool, but only so I can get back. But I'm realizing, or I realized, that was the same cycle. Like the point wasn't to get back to the speed and the quote unquote efficiency that I had believed I was creating at that hyper regulated pace. It was to find magic and messiness in this middle.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really difficult for me because I'm someone who's always operated in extremes. And when I'd be hanging out in this middle, you know, recording an episode each week, coaching my clients, not doing this crazy striving, like hyper overregulated state, or I should say just overactivated, I thought I was doing something wrong for several months. Like, I'm really not as fast as I was before. And it took me a while to remember that's not where I'm trying to go back to, because I know what that leads to. Cognitively, I knew. I was like, as soon as I go back to that pace, bam, I just get hit by a train. And it was weird. And so in 2024, I was just kind of learning what the middle felt like, the middle way, where I'm not going into this like upregulated, downregulated, this constant push and pull, this constant up and down. I was just like, oh, like I feel myself getting off center. I'm going to bring myself back. Ooh. And finding that middle, yeah, I mean, it's balance. It's a balancing act. It took me a while, and I'm still learning it.
I think that's the key lesson here, is that you're just always going to be learning that.
Mm-hmm.
Because what balance is to you is going to change depending on like what ball you're standing on, depending on like, I don't know, what shoes you're wearing, what surface you're balancing on. Like there's so many different factors with that. And I think that's important for people to hear, that balance is not this end destination that we reach at one point and now we're balanced and that's it. I think balancing inherently gives the visual of like you're literally kind of like falling a little bit this way and then a little bit that way. And you're not really steady. You're just kind of finding the balance all the time. I think my experience was actually a little different, but I think I always love our perspectives of things, because I feel like people always will resonate maybe with both or more with one or the other. And I think from my experience healing after the adrenaline and hustling was I was almost feeling so allergic to any sort of speed.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, I was so worried to not get into that state that I didn't want to almost like do anything. And I was almost too hypervigilant with wanting to avoid that burnout. And so it took me a little bit of time, which I'm happy I took my time with this, of slowly adding things back into my schedule and really titrating, adding things into my calendar and really seeing what workflow or even timeline of working felt good to my system. And that, again, is an ever evolving journey, because what feels supportive to my system this week is different from, 4 weeks ago. And so, yeah, I think that can also happen too, that when we heal from this adrenaline, that we end up trying to avoid almost any adrenaline at all or anything that feels like, yeah, because I think that hustling has a really negative connotation now. But I think, being really devoted to something or really excited about something or having a lot of, energy to put towards something, I think that can be a healthy, mode to be in. But yeah, I was just like not letting myself even go there because I was almost too afraid. If we use alcohol as an example right now, what you were just saying was kind of like, okay, yeah, I'll quit alcohol so that I can drink again. That's kind of what you were saying, right? Like, yeah, I'll quit now because then people will be okay with me drinking again, right?
Yeah, I'm like, oh, well, I'll just like, stop drinking so that my liver can heal. And then, I'll just
drink
go
more.
back.
Yeah. I think mine was, okay, I'm going to quit drinking. And then I didn't almost like trust myself to drink at all. I was like, no. But I actually like wanted to maybe have like one drink. This is such a weird analogy, but that's
because we don't even drink.
We literally don't drink. I actually don't remember the last time I had alcohol. It was at least a couple years, but yeah, it feels like that to me, where I wouldn't even let myself be in a room with alcohol because I was so afraid of it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting when we use that example because I was essentially rejecting any form of moderation. Like, because like, imagine like if you have like an over abusive sort of substance problem, I mean, maybe someone would say like, okay, you need to cut that out completely and there's value in that. But I think most people, it's like, okay, like you can have some, but like don't take it overboard like every freaking night.
Yeah.
Like you can have a glass. But in my mind, I was like, one glass? Like, what the fuck is that gonna do? And so I'm learning to see the value in like my energetic moderation. But in doing that, I think I told you this not too long ago. I said that I had such an identity crisis with it because I was like, oh, I'm not an overachiever. Wow. That really was, and we talked about this last year, but that really was just like a coping identity, a coping mechanism. And I think it's also what prevents people from truly healing from a lot of these things because those identities and those patterns have become so protective. We didn't feel safe. We didn't feel okay with ourselves or about ourselves. So we became something. We repeated a pattern until it became part of who we thought we were. And then to heal from that, it means to take that layer off. And it did not feel good. I was like, wait, I'm not an overachiever. If I were to continue to use like the drinking metaphor, it would be like, I'm not the life of the party.
Right.
Like, what? It's like, but I have to be the life of the party. And in order to be the life of the party, I have to like be the drunkest one there or something like that.
Yeah.
And that's how I felt. I felt like as I was detoxing from this constant up and down cycle, I was just, I don't know, becoming regular. And then a lot of my thought work was actually about this relationship to mediocrity. And it's really interesting because it comes up a lot for my clients where there's this like allergicness, like you said, like they're allergic to the idea of being like average or mediocre. And it's so interesting because what they're really saying is, no, I need to be better than the majority of people.
Yeah.
In order to feel safe. And so I've learned to find safety in average, which sounds so weird. And I think in our society, that almost sounds like you're not being positive enough about yourself. Like you should, no, think better of yourself. And it's like, wait, I don't actually think I'm like better than like the majority of people. Like average is literally the mean of the entire population. And I've learned to find a lot of safety and value in that. And I'm not striving so much anymore to be quote unquote above average. And also like above average in what? Right?
Totally.
Like I'm going to be so below average in so many other things. Like I'm below average cook, I'm below average athlete, right? And those don't seem to bother me. So where am I trying to be above average, and like how am I constantly evaluating and judging my worthiness based on where I believe I fall on that scale? And I've just changed. I'm like, you know what? Like let's just say I'm smack dab in the middle. You know what? Put me at the end of the bell curve. Maybe I'm below. Is that okay? And that's really where my work has been, like to be okay with that. And I'm just going to say it. That's hard.
I mean, this is all hard because it's all relative. It's all relative because I think what's so interesting about your share right there is my core beliefs have always been in like, I'm so below average. So I feel like even average would have been maybe like an upswing for me. But it's just interesting though, that even as you were saying that, how the word average just automatically sounds bad.
Yeah, we'll be like average Joe. And
but if somebody said like, how are you doing in school? Average. Oh shit. You're doing pretty bad then.
There's a negative connotation to being the majority, to being in the middle, like the majority of people. And I actually, during this time that I was kind of reckoning with my disgust for the word average, I actually found this Medium article that was really well written. And it was kind of about the same thing, about this guy who recognized that he was allergic to being average in any sense of the word. And so his whole life was about being above average and this overachiever. And then he basically realized he was being an asshole. He was like, I was judging all of these people and obviously judging myself, but trying to find safety and worth by perceiving myself to be better than them, which is not who I want to be. And it kind of called me out because I was like, oh, I didn't realize on some unconscious level that I'm trying to predict and create superiority. And so, yeah, I've been kind of living in this like strange average territory, which is not strange at all. It's just strange to me because obviously I came from an Asian household. Like my grades had to be really high. My mom was deeply disappointed in me if I didn't get awards for like English, math, science, whatever. So, yeah, a lot of my safety in the household was predicated on, can you be above average intellectually or artistically? And so, yeah, I mean, that creates a lot of neuroticism in your adult life. And I've been finding more peace just kind of living with this awareness that, you know what? Even if you're below average, you're still lovable. You're still worthy. And it would be so asinine of me to think that if you did fall on the lower end of that bell curve, that you didn't deserve love.
Yeah, there's a couple things I want to say to that. The thing that's coming up right now, and I'll come back to my other point, is when you look at like a puppy, if you were to see a puppy that didn't run as fast as like the other puppies, you're not like, below average.
No, it's
Don't
the
like that dog.
runt.
The runt is the cutest.
No, everyone loves the runt.
The little baby. But it's just interesting to observe this whole average lens and how we wouldn't apply that to so many things. Like even, I don't know, if my daughter was average at, I mean, a skill set, I'm not like, average. I don't like love her less, right? Like, oh, I'm not grading her. But it's interesting because I think the reason why we love this, it actually goes back to what we said in the beginning. It's just a form of measuring that lets us know that, okay, I'm good. I'm worthy. There's something. And so I think for me, it never felt internally like I needed to be better than someone else. It was much more driven by, if I am the best, then at least I can soothe the part of my brain that's telling me I'm shitty. Because then I have some form of evidence that, no, look, I am good. But obviously that does inherently mean we would have to be better than everyone else. But it just might not sound like that in your brain. But that is essentially why. Because then if we're better than everyone else, then we can find safety in knowing that we're good enough.
Exactly. And yeah, I think it doesn't come because we have like protective measures in our mind to keep us protected from like the belief that we're a bad person. You know, you wouldn't think cognitively, I need to be better than all other people. It doesn't come across that way. And with respect to my relationship to average or above average, I didn't think of it that way either. I wasn't like, I wasn't perceiving that I needed to like be better than like you or like other people I knew. It feels like what you just said. You have to like be the best. And, but it's like best what? And like, if I'm the best, then you're living in this paradigm where there's best and worst, right? There's first, there's last. And as long as you're in that paradigm, there's only one safe place to be within it, which is on the best side or at the top, whatever you perceive as superior. And so, yeah, your whole life just feels really, really dangerous, and not in like a sense of, oh, it's life or death, but you just feel anywhere between like low grade anxiety to like sometimes occasional panic attacks about like your sense of safety in the world. Because if your sense of safety in the world is predicated on how good you believe and perceive yourself to be doing with respect to other people, that's a lot of evaluating, that's a lot of judging, that's a lot of criticizing. And how can we feel supported and safe in a mental environment that's looking for that?
100%. It's interesting because a lot of my clients recently have been bringing up our episode. I think it's because we re-released it too. The universe, it doesn't test you, it reflects you.
Yeah.
Is that one of the ones we re-released?
It is.
And so a lot of people were like, I know you say that the universe doesn't test you, but it really feels like I'm getting a pop quiz, is what one of my clients said. And I wanted to kind of revisit that because I want us to have an opportunity to further elaborate on what we mean by reflection. I think it's just a perspective, obviously, right? If you see it as you being tested, it's just that that's not really a usual helpful perspective to have because we feel like we're in trouble and that we're doing something wrong. But ultimately, the universe is always going to reflect back to you the lessons you need to learn, the things that you need to, see within yourself. Sometimes it's reflecting back the pain that's inside of the attachment that you have to something. So when we say that the universe reflects you, it can be reflecting in many different ways. We just don't feel like it's helpful to think of it as a test per se. Because again, we don't want you to feel like you're in trouble.
Even thinking of it as a test is a reflection too.
Exactly.
Literally, if you think it's a test, then what you're being reflected back is that you think that life is a test that you have to pass and that there's a pass or fail and there's like a reward or a punishment, right? That is showing you what sort of paradigm you're living in. When you don't perceive challenges or obstacles as tests, maybe you perceive it as an opportunity. That's a reflection too of your relationship to challenge. And so yeah, that's kind of funny.
Yeah, no, it's just come up so many times where people are kind of convinced that they are being tested or like this is a test. Like I didn't learn it the last time, so I'm being tested again. And I don't know. I think that's the thing that you and I realize is you're not going to get tested once. If there is a test, you're not going to get tested just once. And I think that's the thing is like you said, things will feel hard again. And there will be moments where this experience will feel easier for you. And then it might go back to feeling hard. And, we're always going to be, I believe, reflected, or at least that our bodies are always trying to communicate to us what's inside. And I think that's what's being reflected back is often we can't see it in ourselves. And that's why when we get attached to something and we can see it, that we really want this or we're not getting it, that just serves as a really beautiful way to be able to see what was unseen before.
Yeah. I would just say reminded.
Yeah, I think it's a reminder, like a notification, like a little ding, right? I always think of it as like, you've got mail. There's something here.
I haven't heard that in my head in so long. Like I just heard like the whole AOL, just
Ding.
that whole sound.
Yeah.
Wow, what a throwback. Did you have AIM? Were you an AIM chatter?
No, we didn't do AOL. We had MSN.
Oh, I had that too. I had both.
Yeah, there was another one that started with an M that was not, what was it? Oh my God, it's going to drive me mental now. But it was another chat thing that I used a lot. Yeah, the good old days.
Those were the good old days. I found a lot of value through silly things like what like my font size was and like what my away message was. Like I
Your
would
profile pic, like
oh my God, I would just lament for days about like what color am I going to make my font for like regular body text. Like it's funny because it really reflects who I am. I feel like to this day, but I chose brown. My font color was brown, and it was like a simple Arial, like a thin, narrow Arial in brown.
This is
like,
hilarious. I would like never use the color brown. I think
pink. Were you using pink?
I don't know what I was using back then. Probably a form of pink or like a purple, just like a something that I would perceive as pretty, which you think brown is, which is not what I perceive.
I wasn't trying to be pretty. It was like, and it's funny because I'm in my room right now, my new room, and I've got this like rust kind of like brown orange color. It's just so funny how we were trying to find our personal brand even back then, like on MySpace, MSN.
Well, the funniest
AIM.
part of that is that I somehow found one of the images that I used to use for that profile pic, and it's so goddamn blurry. Like it's like the shittiest resolution, and we were stressing over something that you can't even see that that's you, barely. It's so blurry. And so it's so funny how much we obsess over that. And I'm like, are we going to be laughing at ourselves in the future? Like I always think about my daughter and what her social media is going to be. Like, is that going to be like a hologram where you like, it projects like the entire post as if the person's there. And then we're going to look back and laugh. Like, remember when we did reels and all you could see was a 2D thing? Yeah.
I'm already laughing and cringing at what I'm creating. I go through, I feel like I go through these, I don't know, these upheavals every couple months where I look at all of my content and I'm like, why did you make that? Like, what? Like, it's kind of like looking back at an old MySpace photo album and you've got like your digital camera held up upside down and you're doing some weird thing in the mirror. And I look at those photos and I'm like, why? What was I doing here? What
Yeah.
what was the intention? And I think the relationship I have to everything I've created at this point is not that I like it now, believe it or not. It's more just like, you know what? That was a reflection of who I was then. Cute.
I mean, it reminds me a lot of even outfit choices. You're like, damn, why the hell did I wear that? And it's like, you know what?
Mhm.
That's a reflection of what I thought looked good back then. That is what I thought my hair should look like. And that is what I thought I should wear. And
Yeah.
that's
And
it.
that's on growth. That's on
That's on
growth.
growth. I mean, even
Yeah.
think about food. I mean, I used to like hate mushrooms. I love mushrooms now. That changes.
Mm.
And so I think everything evolves. And I think that's the deepest lesson that I have been reminded of over and over, and especially over this past few months coming into this new year. Again, that things are cyclical and evolving, and that we're not static beings, that we are, there's so many different elements and nuances to us. And I think another deep lesson that I've learned, it's so funny because we ask our guests at the end of every episode, like, what do you spiral through? And even though our
Life.
podcast is called Spiraling Higher, which insinuates you do spiral through things, I think the thing that I'm continuously get to be surprised by is these deep core wounds that I am so intimate and familiar with, these wounds that I have been carrying and aware of for the better part of my entire adult life. There's still more to get to know about them. And there's deeper awareness and layers that I haven't seen before, even the ones that I've seen, but I see them differently now. And so I just feel like I'm relating and getting to know these parts of me in whole new ways. And that's been surprising and can feel discouraging sometimes, because I think sometimes we feel like, what? Like, how did I not know that? How did I not see that?
Mm.
Which is a whole other pattern. But I think I've been able to really see it with so much love. Just like with my daughter, I'm constantly getting to know her in a new way. Like, she is
Oh.
still at the core the same person, but I'm just learning so much more about her all the time, and even you.
I was just about to say that as I've been friends with you for as long as I have, both physically and like energetically, like
Cosmically, spiritually.
cosmically, dimensionally. I am surprised when I learn like a new thing. I'm like, oh, it's like I'm constantly learning about these nuances and like textures to your emotional inner world, and your outer world is
Mhm.
changing too. And those are obviously influencing each other. And yeah, I'm always surprised by that. But I have a positive relationship to getting to know new things about you or other people. But
Mhm.
it's interesting. I don't always have that relationship to myself, because you're
Yeah,
right. There is that pattern of like, how the fuck did I not know this? Like, I'm
right.
me. I'm me. Like, how did I not know? And I think eventually that cycles into something more like, oh, I didn't know that. Like it just,
Mhm.
like, and there's something spacious about it. Like, I had a really big realization, and so did you. Um, I want to say last week.
Mhm.
Always coming fresh off of realizations.
I think it was
Um,
actually Monday, which was only
okay,
2 days
okay,
ago.
2 days ago.
Yeah.
Beautiful. 2 days ago, I was just like, I think prior to the conversation with you, I was like, what the fuck?
Mhm.
Like, how am I still operating this way? Like, how did I not know this? And then by the time I was chatting with you, I was very much like, oh my God,
Mhm.
yeah, I do that. Oh, like, and there was just this, it was just the realization without the judgment.
Yeah. And I think that's honestly when we can internally feel so much safer to be seen. And I think that's why the deeper you go on this journey, the more you see. I
Yeah.
feel like it's like reverse blindness. It's like your ability to see and what you can see changes. It's almost like our eyes go into like more microscopic, like where we can see things that we couldn't see before. And I think that's a
Yeah.
really cool quality, to be able to find out things about ourselves and discover things, and to know that if you were meant to know this about yourself, you would have before, but you know it now. And there was
Hmm.
no better timeline than this moment, because this is when it's happening. And to, like you said, release the judgment of how long it's been or how long it's taking, and to really give yourself permission as long as it takes, and allowing this to be a lifetime journey of getting to know yourself. And something about that to me has opened up a lot more curiosity and, like you said, a lot more openness, lot less judgment, because I'm really embodying the knowing of there's going to be more to know. Like, I really feel like I've been able to really release this thought of, oh, I know my wound. Like I know my wound as much as I can so far.
Yeah. Well, you know what it is you're releasing the pattern of like, I figured it out.
Yeah.
And I think that pattern it's just the pattern of being a human and having a mind, right?
Yeah.
It's always trying to figure it out.
It
And your
wants to like
life,
solve the problem, the puzzle.
but trying to solve it is what's creating the problem.
Exactly.
Like that's like for you to be seeking a solution is to birth the existence of a problem. And so we make our whole life a problem. And I feel like for me, so much of my life was like this optimization problem. I was like, how do I, always sleep perfectly and like eat well and like create the best schedule? And how do I just optimize it and solve its absence of optimization and make it perfect? And it's like, you know what? You're a human, so you're gonna fuck up your sleep one day. You're not gonna eat properly another day. You're gonna shit the bed on that. You're gonna relapse in this area. And I feel like, in a weird way, it feels like non-growth, but I'm realizing it feels like non-growth to the part of me that was attached to perfection.
Yes, the
But
part of you that's holding the measuring stick is like,
yes,
where do I use this? There's nowhere for it to be used. Yeah.
Literally, she's just like, really? We're just gonna let ourselves go? Is kind of the narrative that she's crafted. But I'm like, no, the growth is listening less to you.
Yes.
And that's so hard. And I think something that will be hopefully comforting to people for you to hear is that just because you realize those parts are operating in that way, I, it doesn't make them change their beliefs. And the way that I want to sort of illustrate this is that, let's say you have, like haters on your Instagram or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Just because you understand that those haters are just projecting their own insecurities or their own hatred of themselves onto you, it doesn't cease their negativity.
No.
Right? Your relationship to it changes, but it continues to be that way. And I think that's something that I was trying to change for so long. Once I realized that I had this like perfectionistic tendency, this like controlling thing, I was like, oh, I'm not going to be like that anymore. Like that's going to go away. Like I've learned it, I've realized it. But the realization is like, oh, that part of me comes up frequently. Like she is just a part of who I am and how I was conditioned. And my relationship to that part of me is what's changing my experience of life, not the absence of that or the elimination of that. I've had to accept that I will always have a part of me that demands perfection, no mistakes, perfect optimization. And I just have to like breathe into that and be like, I know you want that so bad. And that's okay. And that there's life beyond the pursuit of perfection. But she always thinks I'm doing it wrong, honestly.
That is definitely a huge integration that I think a lot of people are going on, and was probably one of the hardest ones for me, was to accept that there were going to be these parts of me that were just always going to be there. And
Yeah.
it was never, ever the journey of getting to a place where that voice goes away completely, because it never will.
And that's also not acceptance.
It's not exactly. And so I feel like a lot of this journey is, you described it so perfectly. It's not about getting rid of these parts, but really inviting them to have a seat at the table and opening a dialogue with them and acknowledging, yes, I know you want to measure yourself. I know that you want to look and see if you're better than everyone else. I know. And we're not doing that. And there's going to be days where she is loud enough that maybe you do start measuring, and then you're going to be like, you know what? We're going to put this down. It really is about integrating all of our parts, accepting all of them, to see them with love, to see their positive intent, and to open dialogue with them. Because I feel like we either just listen to them and we don't even open our mouths to respond, we just listen, or we completely try to ignore them and talk louder, which works for a while until
Talking
that
over
part
them.
gets really loud. And then that's usually when we feel like the universe is testing us.
Yeah.
But it's really that we've been ignoring a part of us that's been trying to communicate. And yeah, I think the thing that I really want to anchor people into as we kind of wrap things up here is, a concept that you and I have been talking about a lot, which is like Team Gina, Team Sam, and being on your own team. And I think that's a really beautiful way to think of this, because if you think about yourself as a system of all of these parts, these different versions of you, how can you get them working together as a team? And there might be a team member, if you're like on an Olympic swimming team and maybe one team member doesn't, come to the practice or whatever, you would still as a team need to figure out how to kind of support that person to get their practice in, or how do we kind of make it, I see this with dance groups all the time. Somebody can't come and all of a sudden you have to create a whole new formation. Like you have to figure out how to make this performance work. And I feel like when we look at ourselves through that lens of what would be supportive for Team Gina or Team Sam, that has been a better opening for me personally to know what I need and to give that to myself versus what do I need? Because sometimes what our needs are can be conflicting for what might quote unquote be better for other people, whether that be business partners, friends, your relationships. But when we can really honor what's best for Team Gina and take those steps, and ultimately everyone around us also benefits. But yeah, there's something about that lens that I wanted to offer people to look through.
Yeah, that was really beautiful. And if you're currently feeling like your year has been slow to start, we're right there with you.
And I love it. I actually love the slowness.
hmm
It
I
just
mean,
it's
it's
more that it feels good to Team Gina. I'm just like, "Thanks, team. Thanks,
thanks,
team.
team.
I needed a slower start, thanks." And this whole concept of hitting the ground running, it's like, can we just, like, gently get onto the floor and start walking?
Well, it's funny because I hate running now. I literally used to run half marathons. I ran 3 in 1 year, which is crazy. Effed up my ankle. But my relationship to physically running has completely changed because I'm like, first of all, you don't need to run to actually be a fit person. Like, you can actually achieve incredible results by walking. And it's funny with running, you can only go so far before you burn out and have to take a break. But if you walk, you can go like for longer.
So true.
And I feel like that's kind of what I'm doing. I've changed my physical pace, my energetic pace. And yeah, to the part of me that used to run, it might feel like, oh, we're going so slow. It really is like the tortoise and the hare. Like
Mhm.
that's what I'm embodying. The freaking
Mhm.
childhood story I learned when I was like 4 or 5 years old. I am being this little tortoise. And sometimes I can embody the rabbit energy too, but it feels like the rabbit in me is judging the pace.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's like, oh no, like this tortoise gets places. And it's not even about getting places. It's about how I feel as I'm moving there.
Exactly, yeah.
And that has been yeah, it's been a slow sinking in. I'm
Tortoise
still
style.
working on it.
Tortoise
Yeah.
style.
I am tortoising my way to the tortoise pace. Like it's it has been, yeah, a slow integration, but I think all of the really meaningful ones are. Like if you believe yourself to have integrated something quickly, you probably didn't. So,
You just intellectually understood it quickly.
yes,
Yeah.
and that has been my entire life. Like I can understand things intellectually very quickly.
Yeah.
I can even provide a great summary as quickly as AI. I could give you a summary. But
Yes.
in terms of literally living, what I've become intellectually aware of is a totally different thing. And so Gina and I call it, well, what we say is that awareness doesn't create change. You have to experience change.
Yeah. And I think it brings us back to another core lesson that we've talked about many times on this podcast, but I don't know how much we talked about it in this particular season, but that life is the things that we learn, whether it be on a podcast, in a program, coaching, whatever, that really is like school. That's like your university. And then the application of that is your practicum. The practicum is where you actually learn how to do it, how it feels. Like I always think about cooking, and it's like it's one thing to read a recipe and be like, I can memorize every single ingredient. Totally different to actually like fry that and like flip it and see how the pan feels, and to know how your stove heats things up with that particular tool. It's the application and the action of it. That's where we're going to somatically understand it on a deeper level beyond just the mental awareness. And I think a lot of people assume that just because they understand it, that they should be able to do it.
Yeah. I think there's like understand and then understand.
Yes. Oh, I haven't heard that in a while. And there's also overstand. Where you just obsess over the knowledge and yeah.
Yeah, you're trying to find safety in like hyperfixating, which I mean, I'm really good at that.
You're really good at that.
Really good at that. Like I will find article upon article, highlight, screenshot, and be like, this, that. Oh my God. I'm like making all the connections. Like I can create these like little mental mind maps that look like I'm trying to find a serial killer.
No, it's literally like a beautiful mind with like the chalkboard and like just yeah. Yeah.
It's literally exactly like that. But I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode and joining us for the first time in 2025.
Yeah.
We are committed to showing up consistently in the most real way we possibly can. And our work is valuable. We love coaching. We love providing reframes. And today, the reframe really just is that your life as it is perfectly acceptable. You don't have to be above average. You don't have to be spectacular. You don't have to be going fast. And if you let go of that, what would it feel like to be living this moment?
And even to take that a step further, it's like you are valuable. You don't need to do anything, not do anything, change anything to be more valuable. Nothing you do can actually adjust your level of value. Like there's no lever or, scale or volume dial on that. And what would it actually do to your system if you actually could give yourself permission to just be as you are and that be enough? And just notice even what that does in your body. Because I think when we first asked ourselves that question, it was like, no, absolutely not. This is not enough. But that again just showed where some of those wounds were lying. But when I have had those moments of deep connection with myself of you don't need to do anything, just as you are loved and I see you. That there's such an opening that happens, and we've both witnessed a lot of our clients experience that connection to self. And so we just invite you to lean into that. Lean into trusting that there is nothing more you need to do or be.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you in the next one.
Thank you so much for listening to this honest conversation. We hope it brought you peace, clarity, and a little bit further along your spiritual journey.
If you loved this episode, it would mean the world to us if you left us a 5-star rating and a review so we can bring you more conscious conversations, spiritual topics, and guests.
And we lovingly invite you to join our free Spiraling Higher community by clicking the link in the show notes to continue this healing dialogue and share with us how this episode impacted you.
Come on in, introduce yourself, and meet your conscious besties in a safe space for healing conversations between us and other like-minded people on their healing journey.
Here's to Spiraling Higher.